Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Cornell Veterinary Podcast, where we deep dive into the discovery, care, and learning that happens at Cornell University's College of Veterinary Medicine. I'm your fabulous host, Dr. Michelle Moyle, visiting assistant clinical professor, and your favorite Purina veterinarian, by the way. And I'm very excited for our show today because my guest is Dr. Mandi de Mestre, the Dorothy Havmeyer McConville, I'm going to keep going, professor in equine medicine and director of the Baker Institute for Animal Health, and all capital letters, and the recently launched initiative, Cornell Equine, which is very exciting, and we're going to talk about all of that. As a researcher, she studies the relationship between the embryo and maternal immunity in horses. Yes, horses. Welcome to the show, Dr. de Mestre.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really thrilled to be here with you. I was listening to your podcast over the weekend and they were just fabulous. I was really excited to join you.
I really, really appreciate that. We didn't even pay her, folks. She actually just volunteered that information, and I'm really happy about that. Awesome. And we're going to jump right in because it's like a beautiful sunny day in Ithaca, and we don't get those often. So this doctor clearly needs to get done with this podcast and then maybe step outside because it's lovely. And so I try to jump in with something that I think is super important, and that's basically people's journeys. And so did you always know that you wanted to be a veterinary scientist, like a clinical scientist? And if the answer to that is no, which I don't know if everybody wakes up going, aha, at like 5, I will be a veterinary researcher. What was your path here?
Yeah, no, I was thinking that as I was coming on, but essentially, I think I wanted to be a veterinarian early on, but the scientist bit came later for sure. I grew up in Australia. You can probably hear from the accent. I'm not here, and on a sort of small to medium-sized farm, sheep, cattle, and horses.
Wow.
And I think the first time I really thought of being a vet was when I was about 12 and my father had just brought all these heifers in to the farm. And clearly we soon discovered that at the previous property, the bull had jumped the fence and a lot of them were pregnant. And they shouldn't have been. They were probably just a touch on the young side for that. So we had our vet out regularly as we dealt with the consequences of that. And I still remember him doing lots of C-sections, cesarean sections, and I was there like the member of the family going, this is fascinating. So that was my first sort of dive into obstetrics. And I think I've been fascinated sort of ever since. But it probably, the scientists, went into vet school and I took a gap year off first in I don't know if you get those in America. In England and Australia, it's a common term, a gap year.
Yeah, we use it. Not everyone does it. I took a few gap years and I'm thrilled with my decision to take them. So I understand for anybody listening, a gap year means essentially she took a break in between maybe undergraduate studies before she went into medical school studies.
Yeah, so I did that between my high school studies and my veterinary studies,
Because Australia.
Yeah, we go straight from high school into...
Must remember that, people.
It's fascinating how it differs around the world. But I did that and I had an opportunity. I was earning some money to get some traveling in and they a family sent me across to Germany from Australia, which was super exciting. And so I was actually teaching a girl, covering all her schoolwork, and she was a dressage rider, so she was at an international station training under someone over there in dressage. And they also had a breeding stallion there, so that was my second delve into sort of gynecology and obstetrics, was watching this stallion being collected. He was a very famous dressage stallion that competed at the Olympics, and so I got hooked again. So by that.
This is why I love doing this show. One, because I was not exposed to a bunch of heifers and horses and sheep in Queens, New York City,
yeah.
Which is very interesting. And two, kind of the journey is so unique for everyone. But for everyone listening, dressage is a type of horse riding. Don't come at me, horse people. I don't know a lot. Think of me as like Alexis Rose from Schitt's Creek, like I know of horses. They're lovely. I have examined them, but that's incredible. But to touch and to help with an Olympic horse, that's an experience that I'm sure is next level and was very exciting for you, because not many people, even veterinarians who do horse work, don't get to work on Olympic caliber horses.
Oh, it was really cool, and it got me hooked. So I haven't left the horses ever since. So I
That's
loved
cool.
it. But it was really, really fun. And then I returned from there to vet school, heads down in the books. And it was actually during vet school that I worked as a research assistant in my third year of what is a 5-year degree in Australia, and started working on a condition called strangles. That's another one for you, strangles in the horse, caused by Streptococcus equi. And that was my first proper sort of delve into research. And then I got a couple more chances in vet school, coming to North Carolina State University and here to Cornell as a final year vet student, and been fascinated ever since. I'm really fascinated by the questions you can address, and discovering something new, I guess, is the really exciting part of being a scientist.
I mean, I'm hearing that you went into the right aspect of veterinary medicine, including research, right? And I think that that's really neat. So for everybody listening, she went right from, and I also think that the different education systems are really interesting. They kind of go from high school and you kind of focus on the career you'd like to do, and then you get to go right into some like undergraduate studies, but right into your medical school training.
Yeah, I know it's completely different, but you dive straight in. I still remember it. Would have been 19 at the time, or actually it would have been 18 and a bit, and walking into an anatomy class, and doing all the things that you do in anatomy classes, and learning about animals and physiology and everything. So it's a real eye-opener, but a lot of fun.
At 18, I am lucky. I showed up for classes on time. I just want everybody to know that. And so it's really, really interesting that people are going to school at such a young age, but it's, again, different system. So I'm really excited about that. And you did this research as a third-year veterinary student. When I have people listening, I want students to know how people seek out their own opportunities and paths. Did you know you want to do more research with horses and then you decided to seek out someone for a job? Or was there a job available and you were like, hey, I love horses and I need money, which many of us do, by the way.
Yeah, holiday jobs.
And this opportunity, yes, exactly. We need to go home. We need to do all these things. So how did that opportunity present itself to you?
Yeah, so it was a little bit of all those things. So thinking about what do I do over the holidays, and wanted to work with horses, curious about research. I don't think I really went out necessarily into the research, and I think that's it. I just was dipping my toe in the water. I was more thinking about horses, being a horse vet for sure. That was sort of the trajectory of that job, and working with horses for the summer. But it kind of just ignited the flame and the interest of this is what I really want to do. And then it sort of took off from there. And I think one thing, if people are seeking things, that you don't have to have your passion of your life when you do those first experiences, just getting really good people around you and good opportunities to learn. I've learned through time has been like the critical part of it. So
yes. And don't
things.
discount something, right? That you think you might not be interested in just because you haven't done research before, or maybe you aren't familiar with horses as much as others.
Yeah, exactly. You could go, and one thing I'll probably come back to you later about, I'm just amazed, when you look across species, there are so many similarities in our biology. While there are some differences, there are many, many more similarities too. So even when we go from people to animals, it's incredible. So
that's a huge part of the reason why I love it. Yes. Yeah. I love being a veterinarian, and every day I'm shocked by the new things we learn. I'm like, I swear I've been a doctor for 18 years, Yeah, that's really new. So how did you end up here at Cornell now?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I was laughing with a friend the other day that the first time I came to Cornell was a final year vet student. So this was part of the Cornell's leadership program for veterinary students that was established in the early 90s. So I was here in 98 as part of that program for the summer, working for 10 weeks.
Love me some 90s fashion, by the way. Okay.
Very much.
Sorry to interrupt, but kids, it was where it was at.
And music.
Thank you! Exclamation point.
But no, I came here to the Baker Institute for the summer, worked in Doug Anzac's laboratory in equine genomics for the summer, and got a taste of Cornell. And I swear they put like a elastic band on me because I bounced back twice since. So I came back here for a postdoc. I came back for a postdoc here after I'd worked in clinical practice and done my PhD in Australia, and then moved to London, then bounced back here 2 years ago as a faculty member. So
wow!
It's
so
really
you've been here a couple of winters.
I've had
and
it,
you've
yeah.
stayed,
and I came back. Yes, even got the family back. So.
Exactly. So that's how they know they've got us, right?
No,
You've made it through winter and you're like, this winter's actually not that bad. Then you really know Ithaca has you.
I know, but then we were hit by the most recent winter, and that was quite a big winter. The first one that I was here, I was like, "Oh, this is a nice easy, and it's fine." And this winter, we've had lots of golden snow.
Wink,
good
wink,
for skiing, though. Good for skiing.
As someone who does not ski, yeah, I'll find something else. It's pretty. It's really pretty. It's really pretty.
It is.
But that's so neat. I actually went to Australia for the first time last year to go visit one Dr. Jessica McCart, who was on sabbatical, and had the best time. I did get to spend some time in Sydney and see the Opera House, and the food scene, so good.
I know. It's
so good.
I know. I called her out the other day of having an Australian coffee cup, so I knew she'd been there. So we're having a laugh.
It was so lovely, and then we can jump into some other things, but I know I have to talk to you about your research because it is important, and I mean really important. So we're gonna jump in, and she says as she pre-Googled the pronunciation of some of the words, including the research that this doctor does. Your research involves understanding, and I will read this, the fundamental mechanisms that underpin aneuploidy, genome stability, and immune regulation in pregnancy. So for all of our non-scientists, our young budding scientists and students, what the heck does that mean? What does all of that mean? Help us, doctor.
So if you don't mind, I'm going to take you back to my clinical years because this is kind of where it all came from and why I do all the things I do. So I'm going to give you a very short origin story. So
I love it.
When I was in clinical practice, I was in clinical practice for a few years, and I was lucky enough to work in a really large equine practice that looked after neonatal foals. It was in Australia, then I did some time in England as well. And this unit was so busy, we'd have up to 100 sick foals, neonatal foals, through the unit every month, would you believe? So even though it was a short time, I had this incredible opportunity to learn about these foals and find ways to treat them from two exceptional sort of mentors that really shared a lot of knowledge. But what I kind of quickly realized, these foals are coming out sick means they have a disease of pregnancy. So they've got sick during the pregnancy. And so, as I've developed my skills over the years in my own research program, I've been really, the fundamental thing we're trying to do is to ensure we get the birth of a neonate, be it a horse, a foal, or a baby that is healthy, alive, and programmed for lifelong health. And that's kind of our goal and what we're all striving for, I guess. So what our research program is trying to understand the things that prevent that happening. So one of the things, very sadly, is if the pregnancy could be established, but then it's lost. And so we try and understand the underlying reasons for those pregnancies being lost. And then we also try and understand other conditions of pregnancy that might lead to the foal being born but being compromised. So having some sort of condition that is sort of develop during pregnancy that allows it to be born alive, but to have other fundamental challenges in early life. So they're the kind of the fundamental things that we're trying to address.
Yeah, I love that. So I really appreciate, and this is something that I think is quite valuable in research and in academia, is people who were in clinical practice before recognizing what they see as a question that they would like to answer or help others answer. And I find that that's really important because seeing the clinical impact, I think, is very important and lends to your passion for the research. But I think doesn't this ever seem like a really daunting task to you? Because you not only have to think about environmental factors, right? So where mom is, you have to think about mom having an issue that will cause an issue with the baby. Then you have to think about issues with the baby that might cause it. Does it ever seem like, how will we do this? This is a tough day.
It's complicated. Yeah, it's very complicated. Yeah. And that's kind of, so when we were sort of starting to build out the research program to, you've got the question, but then you do what you just said and go, where do I go with this? So we kind of went back to fundamentals sort of years ago. We're trying to say, well, what is the main question, we want to address here? And so we thought it could either be essentially the problems could arise in the mare itself. So the mare obviously plays a critical role in nurturing that developing embryo. She provides an environment in the uterus. Her immune system must adapt to support that baby to develop as well. So there could be and there's hormones that change in pregnancy and across pregnancy that are really critical to supporting it. So it could be something there. It could be something external, as you said, like nutrition, sort of interfering with the mare. It could be pathogens, sort of infections such as viruses and bacteria that could infect the mare's uterus. It also
I'm overwhelmed already. I'm overwhelmed.
And it could be actually the embryo itself. So we thought about the embryo, essentially the genetics of the embryo is half from mum and half from dad. And so it's inheriting genes from both, and then it creates a whole new genetic being, essentially. So what we quickly realized when we were studying this is a lot had been done on the mare. A lot of people had looked at the uterus and looked at hormones a lot, but we knew practically nothing about how the embryo itself controls its own fate. And I started thinking a lot. I actually had young children at the time, and so I was thinking about they have a mind of their own.
Good timing.
So
I think that will never change.
Exactly. So, but essentially I thought this, they really, though, formed even in utero life with this sort of genetic programming, sort of controlling their own destiny. So I was really fascinated by this concept of how that intrinsic ability of the embryo sort of interacts with the mare and the environment. And obviously the embryo is really key in the context of the stallion because it's inherited some of the genes from the stallion. So that's where the stallion comes in. And I thought we'd spent years thinking, even in women's health actually, years thinking that miscarriage and pregnancy loss is a problem with the female. And if you think about how you investigate that, even when you go along to the doctor, like it's often the first thing they do is do every test on the female, be it a horse or this. And I started thinking, well, what happens if it's not always about the female? It could be something out of the female's control. It could be something in her control, but it might not. Let's kind of go back to that embryo and see how it's controlling its own life. So that's kind of where we've really focused actually a lot of our work recently on the genetic characteristics of the embryo and seeing if there are certain genetic characteristics that are incompatible with life so that they're not going to make their way through to birth because there is something in the blueprint, the DNA blueprint, that is telling us that the genes and the proteins that are made just don't function normally anymore. And so that's sort of one of the main fundamental questions we've spent a lot of time sort of thinking about of late is what are those things that go wrong with the blueprint that lead to that embryo not developing on and producing a live-born animal.
Wow. And I said that really fancy word, right, that I Googled. It's not that fancy, but it's sort of fancy for the rest of us, that aneuploidy. And that's essentially a condition where these foals or these babies are, they might have an abnormal number of chromosomes, right? So they're either missing some or maybe they have extra. And maybe a condition we might know of on the human side is something like Down syndrome, I think people talk about a lot.
Yeah.
But sometimes these things happen and then these foals are never born. And that's what you're looking at. Like, was there information past that complicated things or wasn't passed?
Yeah, exactly. So we were trying to find, did they have abnormal, that was kind of our first question, do they have abnormal numbers of chromosomes, and could that be an explanation for these pregnancies not progressing along? And so we were really excited when we found out that was one of the main reasons, so just between 50 and 60% of the pregnancies that don't progress through early pregnancy are due to an abnormal number of chromosomes. So it's about half, very similar to what you'd see in women, for example. So if women suffer from miscarriage, the most common reason in that early period is that embryo inheriting an abnormal or gaining during development an abnormal number of chromosomes. Sort of messes up the whole blueprint.
Yeah. And this is another thing I really appreciate about veterinary medicine and kind of this One Health look, right, at everything, how it could equate to what we see on the human side. Because quite a few women, I don't know the exact statistic, but personally, I know quite a few women who have lost pregnancies and obviously who have tried to become pregnant. So this is not a one answer to everything, but wow, 50%, that's a fair amount.
It's a lot. It's a lot, really. Yeah, because you have the literature would suggest about 23 million pregnancy losses worldwide. So it's one of those things, very sadly, people don't talk about, do they? It's one of those things that often gets hidden.
It's a little taboo.
A bit taboo.
Not taboo, but shameful. People feel bad.
Yeah, and it comes back to the thing about I think often the woman feels responsible for it, and this causes a lot of distress. So I think trying to find out, that's sort of a real driver for me, is really trying to find out the cause so those people don't carry that sort of burden on them. If we can try and find better diagnostics and reasons for these losses, they can manage that, as a couple better and understand, the true reason and what they could do. Or sometimes you can't do anything, sometimes it's just a bit of bad luck.
Yeah, sometimes we just need to know it's out of our control.
Exactly.
Sometimes, right? But on the animal side, I mean, some people can lose foals that are worth significant amounts of money. So this is business, right? So there's some widespread effects here. Wow. And do you hope, I guess my question is, how would you like to see your research impact the human side? Is it this? Is it trying to help correlate the two and allow for some discoveries on their end?
Yeah, so I'm really passionate about that from here. I really would like that intersection between animals and people. And so
big parts.
I really, really love that. But essentially what we could think about is on the horse side, what's quite unique about horses is from a gynecological care, so that is just how a doctor looks after a pregnant animal, is how it's been monitored. Essentially in horses, they're very intensely managed. So a lot of horses these days will have certain procedures to get pregnant and to conceive, and then they have their first ultrasound test. So this is where we put the sort of camera on and try and image the pregnancy and the developing fetus. They'll do that as early as 2 weeks after that baby has formed, after the embryo is formed. And so it's really, really early. So you could think of it, if anyone's sort of familiar with like a pregnancy test in humans, that's often done buying a test from the chemist, that's done about the same time, that very first test, but it's not done with a camera, essentially. So that's sort of the first time we can, and then often they're monitored weekly. So because of this, we can actually track the pregnancy, we can track its growth, we can determine when it's failing, and then the veterinarians, if it's failing, can flush out the embryo when we know it's no longer viable, it's not going to live, and then we can study that material. So that's giving us access to material over these really key early embryo stages that you wouldn't get in people, essentially. And so it gives us a completely new window. And it's also in a species, like a lot of horses get the same types of medications that we use in humans in how we change the reproductive cycle. And so we can study the effects of those. So we can use this material to try and discover sort of new genes and that might be responsible for, or genetic changes that might be responsible for miscarriage.
Yeah. And that window is much smaller than I think would be found in humans, right? So probably humans can't have ultrasounds every 2 weeks. I don't know if they do. I do not know the answer to that, everyone. But
yeah.
I'm sure insurance would not want one every 2 weeks.
Yeah, good point. And they're normally 6 to 7 weeks is often when their first sort of scan is happening. And then
so that window
12 weeks
might have
roughly.
Passed.
Yeah, you might have had that passed and you don't capture those really early losses. So and we can't release. So you're looking, so and you can try, people have tried to model it in mice, for example. So you rodent models. But what they found is by genetically modulating the mice, they've been able to discover lots of potential genes, but when they've translated it back to humans, a very small percentage of those are actually been found to be causing the disease in humans. So we don't know if that's just because it's mouse specific, or we don't know in this case whether we just haven't discovered them yet in humans because we haven't had like a lot of this time period. So that's kind of the gap we're trying to fill with the horse, as well as benefiting the horse itself, is trying to fill that really early gap of the first sort of 6 weeks of the embryonic and fetal life and try and understand what goes wrong then.
I could talk to you about that all day, but I'm supposed to ask you other questions, and I'm going to try to move on. But that is just so interesting to me. And I just think it's another neat thing to hear that people are actively researching because, again, it's important and has implications in other areas, both on the human side and probably for other animals, which you mentioned. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so research is part of your work here at Cornell. And then while you're free, you also, I say free, everyone, I'm joking, freeze in like quotation marks. You have this pretty significant leadership role, more than one. And I want to just touch upon that and we're going to touch upon a couple, but you are the founding director of an initiative at Cornell called Cornell Equine. And this was launched in late 2024. Can you tell us about this initiative? Like, well, one, what prompted it and what are the goals of this program? Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it's a real privilege to be part of this. And I think there's been so much done around this initiative already before I got here. So I should put that up front. I just came at a time to
give props out. Just giving her props.
So it's a really long-standing. So equine stuff, would you believe there's a great story? So I hope you don't mind me telling it again, but there's a great story about Cornell's sort of equine origins. And that was back to when it was originally sort of founded. And Andrew Dickinson White was going across to Europe to get new faculty back in the sort of 1860s. And
I was just going to say, guys, this is like the late 1800s she's talking about. So, if you don't know much about Cornell history, it's pretty impactful. Look it up.
Yeah, a long time ago. But and Ezra Cornell was supposedly standing on the dock and called out to him, "Don't forget the horse doctor." And so I kind of think of horses as being part of sort of Cornell's sort of structure since its very first days. And some great photos I've seen recently of some teaching done in those very, very early days in the horse. But, it really is ramped up, I think, since the 1970s. And we have a huge amount of research going on here at the moment. So we've got 35 faculty with active horse-related research projects on the Discover side, which is really, I was really blown away when I sort of looked at that. We've obviously got our clinical care in our equine hospital, Cornell University Equine Hospital, and then you've got a lot of learning going on. We've got actually an animal science degree with equine subjects down in Cowles. And then you've got those.
Cowles is our undergraduate, right? agriculture program at Cornell University. So they do a lot of animal science and things as well, but focused on the equine, you're saying.
But there's a group, that's focusing on the equine.
Awesome.
They also run the Cornell Cooperative Extension. So they do a lot of outreach work across the state around equine education, which is really cool as well. So we have that sort of and obviously our veterinary degree and residence and internships, which I'm assuming people would know about. So that's really exciting. We've got sort of all the students across those breadths. We've even got like farrier courses. And so there's a lot going on the learn side. But the other area which I've really had a lot of fun learning about is we've got a big compete side. So we had athletics department that have active polo and equestrian teams here at the moment. And they've been highly successful. So a lot of our undergrads are in those programs and they've won nationals multiple times. The women's polo this year won nationals. And we had several equestrian riders at nationals this year. So they're really fantastic. So I think the idea of this program was to try and bring all of those equine parts together and see how we can work as a community to try and tackle some of the big outstanding problems. And as I mentioned at the beginning, there was a big report done by some colleagues here back in 2019 that reviewed all this and put it together, and we reviewed it with some clinical science colleagues as well. And we sort of said together, wow, like there's so much going on. We should be bringing this together and finding sort of new ways to communicate. And there were two big things we're trying to tackle, I guess, to take away. Well, one was we really wanted to produce sort of highly trained equine vets and retain them in the profession. And so, there needs to be people out there looking after horses, caring for them. So what we wanted to do is see if we can start to sort of coordinate our mentoring. So it's one of my favorite things is mentoring, like from high school all the way through vet school. So how do we sort of build out a program to do that? So this summer we've got a program we're working with the Cooperative Extension. Cornell has done this for many years. Our vet school has done this for many years now, but we're sort of firming that up and trying to say, how do we support these students all the way through and retain them? So that's one big thing and it requires the coordination. And then the other big part with all of these researchers, we're starting to think like, how do we work together to try and tackle some sort of multidisciplinary problems? So how do we take all of these skills to tackle some of the more difficult problems of equine health? And so that's where we've just launched a new seminar series so we can share ideas each month across the community and hopefully launch a new sort of grand challenges or something like that, which is part of one of the college's initiatives at the moment. Maybe we can do that in the equine sphere. So early days, but, really some exciting stuff going across campus.
That's really exciting. There are so many things I loved in all of what you just said. One, on the podcast, if people here are listening, they've listened to more than one episode, they've heard me talk about diversity of thought and how that contributes to research and furthering scientific thoughts and furthering, again, what we do and how we accomplish things, sometimes quicker than if somebody was doing research alone. Maybe the polo team has noticed something about their horses. Congratulations to the women's polo team, by the way. It's that diversity of thought that can help bring ideas and hypotheses, things that maybe never occurred to you. So I want to applaud that because I think that that's lovely. And I think sometimes we don't think about some areas in animal medicine, things like that, husbandry, that really can contribute to our research, even though it might not seem straightforward. And finally, your focus on mentorship. Oh, big hearts, because high school is really where we want to have impact. Even middle school is where we want to have impact. And for our listeners, equine vets, and I just talked about this on another program, equine vets can be very difficult to find. A lot of our students don't go into equine medicine, and then if they go into equine medicine, they typically don't stay in equine medicine, right? So we want them to feel supported. We want them to have mentorship. We want them to get paid well for their knowledge. We want them to have the knowledge and the passion to go do this. So this is exciting on so many levels. And I just want to say, I'm so happy you're doing this.
Oh, it's really exciting. I mean, just at the beginning, there's so much we can do. So, and so many incredible people across campus, sort of making it possible. I'm really excited. I love your. I wrote down. Would you believe when I was listening to some of your podcasts, I wrote down diversity of thought on my piece of paper in front of me because I thought that was a great way of putting it. Because we think about that in the lab as well. Like when you're thinking about research, like connecting with horse owners, and because they bring different perspectives. I had one of my research projects essentially came out years ago out of meeting with a stud farm owner. And this is a horse, so stud farm is a property like a horse farm where they keep horses and they're breeding them. And she was telling me about this condition that was causing pregnancy loss in her mares. She said, it's really a big problem, Mandy, and I don't know what's going on. And essentially it was a condition where the umbilical cord was getting twisted. And I was like, I don't know anything about this. This is really fascinating. Wow. So I went to read up about it and realized actually we don't know much about it at all, but it was super common. And so I have her to thank for really sparking that curiosity and sort of partnering on that.
Yeah, I love that. I find that sometimes in veterinary medicine, we know things are common and we just kind of accept it. Not because we don't want to understand it, but sometimes it's things that have been around for a long time. And we think, well, someone must have studied that. They probably know why. That person is not me. And then sometimes we realize, wow, maybe it just hasn't been studied because it's difficult to catch or it's difficult, right? So thank you for mentioning that. So you have this, I'm laughing because again, she has I'm sure she doesn't have much free time. So you lead this amazing initiative and like, as if that's not enough, you were just named the new director of the Baker Institute for Animal Health this past February. And for those who don't know, the Baker Institute is essentially an institution that's dedicated to studying veterinary infectious diseases, immunology, cancer, genomics, and reproduction. So a lot of things are under the umbrella of this institute. So what made you want to tackle this also?
Great.
Just, she was like, I have some time on Fridays.
Well, this is an amazing place, actually, and I feel
it is
such an honor and a privilege to take on the role up here. It really is. But would you believe it's 75 years this year since it was established? So we've got a birthday party here this year, which we're all very excited about and planning some events for.
But if there's cake, I'll be there. I will see you there.
Yeah, we've had some cake. We'll definitely have you back for cake.
I'll be there.
Excited about that. So essentially what Baker is sort of this unique environment where we're positioned well off the vet school. So we're about 2 miles away, but we're all very much part of the vet school. We're established to be a part of the College of Veterinary Medicine 75 years ago, but it was really established to be sort of have one location really dedicated to studies of animal health, so animal research. And its early days, I really thought it was really about this, and you'll see a theme in a moment, but it's about connecting with communities. It's done a lot of research, like fundamental science research, where it studies samples that get sent in by clinicians from all around the country and all around the world.
Sure. Samples meaning like blood and urine and tissue in cases of like disease where they take samples and they submit this to you, just for everyone listening? Okay.
Yeah, so blood's either from a disease or even just like a DNA sample to study DNA or maybe infectious agents. So it's probably... But Baker, its early thing that it was most famous for was something that came out in the late 70s, early 80s was parvovirus. So the parvovirus vaccine was developed here. That's given to dogs now, all around the world. So it's done a lot of that. You mentioned the infectious disease first. That was kind of its early years. We're really heavily focused on those sort of infectious diseases.
Just as an aside, if you do small animal medicine or you're interested in small animal, as someone who practiced in a part of California that saw quite a few parvo dogs, the vaccine was life-changing because I've seen many dogs, unfortunately, pass away from parvo. I've seen many, also make it through with significant care, but not an easy thing. So that is a very cool thing to be under the auspices of the Baker Institute, right? Like the parvo vaccine is a big deal.
Yeah, it's something that's sort of rolled out. So that kind of is one of its sort of early things. Distemper. It was also rinderpest. So a number of big
Yeah,
viral
just that.
diseases. Just it's sort of
Yes,
some
huge,
amazing sort
huge.
of predecessors here having sort of big impacts, and that's how it sort of started
Wow.
connecting to communities, because the veterinarians were faced with these issues, and they would take samples and send it up here, and then they studied those viruses as the outbreak's happening, and then worked on solutions. And so that kind of approach is really rolled out now across other platforms where we have work done around fertility. We have sort of fundamental research around cancer, as you said, but the same sort of approach of doing sort of fundamental science or often on clinical samples with sort of translational outcomes. And that what I mean by translation, it means that we can jump to a diagnostic test or to a treatment or a preventative medicine relatively quickly, although science always, when I say relatively, it takes a lot of years to...
She means relatively. Yes. It's sometimes a slower process.
So it's a slow
But that's so
process.
neat because you're your own institution, but you're still connected to the veterinary school. So that translational approach is really neat because you're in proximity. Different buildings don't necessarily make a huge difference right now,
Correct. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And is that part of what excites you most about this role? I mean, you're doing all this exciting research. So what about being the director that excites you?
Yeah. So,
Because it's not the paperwork, everyone. It's not the paperwork. That's not the answer. Just so we
oh,
know.
that's so funny.
Okay.
So I guess what is most exciting to me here is the way they do science. And so I've been learning so much about what's going on across all the labs here. So I've been able to, I work in my own field, but it's a real privilege to be able to learn about the incredible science across the whole institution. And just the way they do, way people are doing science here, and the way they're thinking about things. I'll tell you another example from one of our labs, like studying the fundamental biochemistry of sperm has led to essentially a stall side or bedside diagnostic test that they're now developing for stroke. So our faculty do these crazy things like take something like, I'd got into trouble the other day, Michelle, because I said, we break the rules. And then I thought, I better explain what I mean by that. But in science...
No one likes hearing that at Cornell, by the way. Yeah. Right.
So in science, what you do in science, you can get sort of in small little areas in research, can't you? So if you think of people, you tend to focus on one thing for a long period of time. But a lot of our faculty here really we'll start, this is an example where they were studying sperm, so they're a reproductive biologist, but now they're developing a test for stroke, which is a condition that's in the brain, and neurological condition. And that's sort of just an example of how they don't like to sort of stay here. They follow the science and find really sort of interesting ideas. So that's sort of been really exciting for me to watch that, learn about that, and I guess talk about that to people, because the Bakers have this long-standing sort of relationship communicating science to people sort of outside of the institute, and it's really fun to be able to get those messages out and work with other people and talk about that.
That is exciting and a lot of fun. And I think for those listening, I think sometimes as someone, or before I was in science, or who have family members who are not in science, they don't understand how one person can probably study one disease or even one aspect of disease, and it could take their entire career. It could take their entire career, right? So yes, there are enough questions there, but what's neat about what you're saying and what I love to talk to people about on this podcast is they've asked themselves a question and then they got another question. They're like, oh, I think I'm going to go there. Oh, shiny. Wait, hold on. It's not a big distraction, but they want to answer that question. So yeah, they started off with sperm. Me saying things I never expected to say on the podcast. And then now they're studying strokes, which is, I think, a really lovely thing about science. And I talk about pivoting. Sometimes you don't have to pivot careers. You could just pivot topics or aspects of things you're studying, the passion can still be there, right? And you could tackle these new things. So I love that.
Yeah, it's really, really fun. And the other thing, I guess, that's going on here, which feeds into my interest, is a lot of the work is about these shared benefits between animals and humans. And so really thinking about our companion 100%. Animals in a different way. So a lot of what we do is that fundamental sort of research. And that's really fun, thinking that you can bring benefits. It's a real privilege, really, to think you could try and bring benefits to animals and humans alike. I think it's really fun.
Yes, and lead to helping another team with what they do, like, right? It's just so gratifying. I love veterinary medicine. I love research. I love science. Oh, wait, okay, well, I love research most of the time. So you have these jobs, you're just not busy. You're just the director of the Baker Institute, and you're doing this Cornell Equine initiative. And oh yeah, you have your day job as a researcher. So what do you do when you are not at work? Because we're humans, and I want everybody to know this. We've talked about this a lot on this podcast. We are just not our jobs. We are more. So what do you do when you are not working?
Okay, well, what do I do? So I've got 3 kids, and so
oh my gosh,
mostly
she's busy.
Mostly with them, 3 kids. I love making cakes. That's my thing. Love making cakes. So,
I took cake decorating courses. I love making cakes.
Yeah. Oh, that's because that was my big thing. When the kids were little, I used to love making these extravagant sort of cakes that were all decorated in different ways, kids' cakes. That was kind of really fun. Now they've evolved to different other types of adult cakes, but it's been really fun. So between those 2 things and just hanging out with friends, that is doing hikes, that's really fun.
Oh, she's a hiker, everyone.
Yeah. Well, not a big hiker.
I'm not. That's one thing I haven't picked up on. That is one thing I have not picked up on.
Well, it's an Ithaca thing, isn't it? Like I must say, I wasn't before this, but in England, when I moved across from England, they have all these bridleways, like where you can walk through people's properties. It's a bit crazy, actually. So you can just walk through private property if there's a formal bridleway there. So you can go. Okay. Yeah, it's very different. So I've learned that here with all the waterfalls. It's great. You can actually make the most of all the waterfalls and hikes everywhere.
It really is beautiful. I know I joke. I've said this before, that I am outsidey, not outdoorsy, right? Like, so a hike, but next to a waterfall, I'm in. I'm willing to get to the waterfall. So, a couple of things, because I know your time is precious. Do you have any? I've used this scenario in the past. You're at a party. You don't get to go to a party, and not like the Cornell anniversary party. You're at another party. You're at a party where you get to socialize. Maybe you're having cake. Sometimes people are having drinks. And you're like, what's the story I would share about a day that I had at work in practice or in research that you were like, I need to share this story. I can't believe that happened. Gosh. Do you have something like that?
Oh, that's a great one. You might have stumped me there. I'm okay
with that. It's okay. Stories. The pressure's on.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to think of the ones from practice. I did. When you're a vet, you do have amazing experiences, though.
Yes.
On 2 levels. I think there's the animal experiences, but you just get to experience all of humanity. I think that's the most cool thing about being a vet.
So funny.
And you get to hear different perspectives. When you're treating the animals, I think you're often treating the owners as well in an indirect way, because you're caring for people and you learn so much. I've heard so many stories from all these clients that I used to work with years and years ago of their lives that were brought into that.
Yes. And I appreciate that. And it doesn't have to be, and I want everybody listening, obviously I joke around about these stories, but as veterinarians, we are often, if you're in clinical practice at all, you are often with owners, and that small animal, horses, goats, anybody. You're with owners at some of the happiest times of their lives and some of the most difficult times of their lives. And that is one thing I did not expect becoming a veterinarian. And sometimes you're one of the only people they talk to. This is the human-animal bond is a very unique thing. And if they're with their animal all the time and then they see you and you're the only person they see routinely, it is So impactful. And I think I just want to make sure that everybody listening knows that. So I very much love that you said that.
Yeah, and it's about people, isn't it? And you've had
humanity.
some humanity, I think, and it's such a privilege to be involved in those journeys. And it's hard if anyone's a junior vet, like, when you're just starting out. I think that's the hardest lesson in a way, because you take on so much of this, people's lives, and you can take them on board, and it piles on top of you, and it can be really, really tricky when you're piling all that on and taking on everyone else's, challenges.
Yes.
So you have to learn.
And that is emotionally, draining and can be tough. And so, so a few final things. What would you say, what is one bit of advice that you would give to a student who is thinking about research?
Okay, so I think, can I give two?
Yeah, we love that. The students are ready. I love it.
Coming back to what I've said, surround yourself with good mentors. So I think that, that's the fundamental thing. I've been so lucky, Michelle, and over my career, just the most amazing people around me. Yeah. And I just think it matters. It really matters. It really does. And when I say a good mentor, there's no such thing as a good mentor. It's a good match for you. I think that's the key. And some of my best mentors have helped me in different ways. And even actually at the time, I might not have even thought they were helping me, but maybe even 10 years' time, I'm like...
Translation, we were like, grr. And then we were like, oh, wait, they were right.
Actually, they were really right, yes. So, they're really, really amazing. So people, are really generous with their time. So surround yourself with people that really help you, lift you up, find your way. I think that are good for you. I think
I would expand that to your general life as well, everyone. Like, find joy, the people that help you find joy. Okay, yes. Yeah. And number two?
my two is don't take failure or hardship too personally. So, my family watches this show called Ted Lasso.
And I love that show.
It's my favorite show. I love it.
My gosh.
Has this saying.
Apple TV, everyone, if you don't know where it's playing. Okay.
So he has this saying he said to his son, just pretend you're a goldfish to forget something. Yep. I should add, as a veterinarian, I have since looked that up, and actually goldfish don't have bad memories. They actually have I've since read and looked at the science, and they actually have a reasonable memory. But
I love that you do that. Yep. So I love it.
But, his theory was to be a goldfish and just forget things sometimes. And, you need to learn from some things.
Just let them go.
Just sometimes you need to have a short memory of certain things and keep going on. And I think, that is absolutely, critical to success in anything that you do is trying to let go of those things. Yeah.
Another great quote from that show, everyone, be curious, not judgmental. We love that. Yeah. We love that. And you might appreciate this. I have a cat named Roy Kent.
Oh, yeah. I'll wait till I go home and tell my family.
Yep. Love it.
We have lots of impersonations all the time.
Oh, I love it. Okay, 2 quick questions before I let you go, because I try to get a couple of fun ones in. When you are doing your research or writing a grant and you're in your zone, is there music playing in the background?
Yes. And I have
and what is it?
I have I actually use a Spotify focus music. That's like a classical, but they're classical takes on rock songs. So pop songs. Yeah, so they're like classical takes on pop and rock songs. And that's what I have if I really need to focus and block things out. Yeah. Which I really need to make time for these days. Otherwise, I jump from meetings to meetings. So it's really fun. I just put this on and that puts me in the focus zone.
She's in the zone. Love it. Love it. And then I was going to ask you about cake, but people honestly know that I'm addicted to sugar, so I'm probably going to stray from that. What is one thing that most people don't know about you that you're willing to share? One fun fact. Just little nugget for our knowledge to take away.
Oh, one fun fact. I think I've disclosed the 3 kids now, so not many people know about those. And I do have...
Can't reuse that.
I can't reuse that one. I've got a really cool, gorgeous research dog who travelled over from England with us a couple of years ago, called Volt with a V, because he used to be quite an electric dog running around. And he's fun, great fun. And he was a dog that was from a study of muscular dystrophy. Actually, he's a natural. He's a great example. So I'm sort of living what I say. He's an example of shared benefits for human and animals. So he's from a parentage that had a mutation in his blueprint, in his DNA, that led to muscular dystrophy in some of his siblings. And they've been trying to study how to prevent this in the dogs, but also in young boys as well. It's the same type of mutation in boys. So Volt is a prize member of our family. He seems to have a love for American wildlife. He's been skunked. So we've learned that was our initiation 2 weeks after arriving from England. But he is a very much loved member of our family that gets very indulged these days by snuggling up on couches and keeping everyone in the house happy.
That sounds like a great life. And yeah, I may own a dog that I also adopted from my rotation, right? The students learned how to do surgery, and now I have the most polite and quiet dog on the planet. But thank you so much for sharing your time with us, for sharing what you do at Cornell, for sharing your research. It is extraordinary. For those of you listening, please check out the Cornell Equine, check out the Baker Institute, check out Dr. De Maestre's research online. It's incredible. You can Google and find a whole bunch of research. And just thank you. Thank you for sharing your world with us. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I really had a lovely time chatting to you and hearing about your interests as well. So thank you so much for your time.
Why, thank you. I appreciate you. I appreciate all of you listening, or some of you might be watching. If you are, I am wearing more Cornell swag. Cornell, reach out to me with some other color options if possible. Like and listen on your favorite platform. Subscribe if you want to hear us whenever we drop a new episode. And thank you so much, everybody. And we will talk to you soon.